All right, what's going on there, folks? Good evening. It is the Earthmaster back here late on this Wednesday night, September 27th, 2023, about 10:54 p.m. here, California time. Latest activity, 3.2 coming into the Puerto Rico area. Taking a look at the USGS last 24 hours here on the globe. Starting off here in the, or at least on the map, 24 hours of activity around Puerto Rico. There's that 3.2. Coming in outside of the San Antonio, Puerto Rico area near the Mona Passage, about 7 kilometers deep. Handful of earthquakes out here in the last 24 hours. Nothing major going on here across the subduction zone yet. Going to start over here across the west coast. See what we got brewing out here across the Walker area, Walker Lane area, I believe this is called. Did see a 3.6 earthquake earlier this afternoon. About 3 kilometers deep or so. We have seen a handful of smaller aftershocks within this area of the Antelope Valley. Not the Antelope Valley down south, but up here across the Nevada and the California border here, south of Lake Tahoe. Getting things stirring up out here slightly. Northern California, not a whole lot going on as we can see here. Got one earthquake in the last hour near the Walnut Creek region, a 1.3. That's just off of the Pleasanton Fault, I believe that's called. Let's see here. Or maybe it looks like it's a section of the Calaveras Fault Zone. There's a couple different fault systems that run through this area. I mean, California is just riddled, absolutely riddled with fault systems. Down here on the Elsinore Fault, got a little activity as well. A little small movement activity here near the... I'm not for sure how you pronounce that. Pine Hills area in this little lake here off 76. A 1.1 and a little 0.6. Nothing major going on at all. No major swarming across the San Andreas Fault or the southern areas of the plate boundary extension. Things look typical there for now. Into the Pacific Northwest, handful of earthquakes there at Mount St. Helens. That's kind of been an ongoing thing here, and we'll continue to report on that. Nothing major to report on far as any changes go. Just a handful of smaller earthquakes there in the past 24 hours. The rest of the country, well, not a whole lot to report out here across the nation. Alaska area looks very typical out here. One little oddball earthquake off the plate boundary of 4.8. That earthquake coming in earlier this morning, about 2 o'clock or so, near the Bering Sea. And again, this is off of the plate boundary here, well inland, about 5 kilometers or so deep. Just a little bit of activity stirring up out there. Nothing major across the Kuril-Kamchatka. In fact, it looks like most of the activity here has been clustered across the area of the Banda Sea and the Indonesia Islands area, where we did see some 4s and even a 5-pointer in the last 24 hours. Here's this earthquake off of the Java Trench area, 5.4, just off the west coast of northern Sumatra. This is back building here, so to speak. This is off of the plate boundary in the Cocos Basin area. This area across the Sumatra area, very capable of producing some large damaging earthquakes, and the subduction zone here, slip rate is high, quite high. Doesn't take many hundreds of years to build up enough strain for a big earthquake. So kind of watching that. When I see this earthquake activity occur prior to a subduction zone off the plate boundary, yeah, something definitely could be building out here across this area. Movement across the Fiji region. One earthquake there in the Samoa area. Looks like a 5.0, 52 kilometers deep. Prior to that, deeper movement quakes here across the area of the Tonga Trench. Still watching this area around Solomon Islands here to fill in. I think that's going to be filling in here soon, but seems to be skipping it here lately with bouncing back and forth of activity over this plate boundary. New Zealand, of course, at 4.2 earlier this morning here, my time, local time. Let's see what we got here across the New Zealand area for the GeoNet servers. Stand by here for just a second. 4 hours ago, 2.3. That kind of looks like it's around the Taupo supervolcano. 2.4, 11 hours ago. 2.9, there's 4.7 prior to that. Let's go ahead and check out the volcano drums out here. This will give us a good indicator of maybe something brewing or something not brewing out here. That, let's see here, Taupo supervolcano sits about here. Now it looks like that's going to be that smaller earthquake that was reported on the earthquake graph. Let's check out the earthquake drums here and see what we have brewing out here. Some movement from yesterday, and some activity around where that 6.0 struck here about a week or so ago now, near the Rada Peaks area. Just seeing a little bit of continued aftershock activity. That's common with any large-scale movement. Somebody asked me about these earthquakes out here. Just because they've been seeing quite a few small ones out here, does that mean that it's preventing the big one from happening? Well, you have to ask yourself: are those smaller earthquakes occurring along the plate boundary, for example, where strain typically builds up, or is this occurring off of the plate boundary in areas where we could see that migration of pressure, similar to what you would see, for example, along the San Andreas Fault here, right? We know these fault systems here leading up to the plate boundary add strain up here, right? This is the main plate boundary, but these subsequent and prior fault systems here build up and add strain up against it. So it all depends on if we're seeing a bunch of smaller earthquakes along the plate boundary now or not. I think to maybe some extent, if we see some threes or fours, and some maybe some moderate activity, it could potentially be a sign of release of strain, but it all depends on location, proximity. If we're seeing those 3s and 4s back building over here, or on, and this is what worries me over here along the North American side of the plate boundary, then that could be, obviously much more strain building up across these areas that are capable of producing some large damaging earthquakes. So I'm just kind of comparing the San Andreas Fault here to the New Zealand area. They kind of sit along somewhat of a similar plate boundary, so to speak. Well, of course, you got the subduction zone here, right? Across the Hikurangi subduction zone. But this area right here, similar, because this is kind of a strike slip zone across the New Zealand area. And far as comparison and size, maybe a little bit less. But, whether I think smaller earthquakes out here across the plate boundary itself releases pressure, potentially. But if these earthquakes are occurring inland and after the plate boundary, I think that's not a good sign. Remember, we've seen this activity in the Tasman Sea area earlier. It's been about a month or so. I think we've seen some activity stirring up out here in the basin. That's activity that is not typical. So the strain has to build somewhere. So we're looking at some activity stirring up out into these intraplate areas away from the plate boundary. So I still think there's quite a bit of strain out here across the Alpine Fault and the New Zealand area. It's hard to say what kind of pressure it would take to release, or maybe trigger the big one. Similar to California, right? Out here, we're dealing with water levels, the shrinking of the Salton Sea area. That plays a part on the weight of the plate boundary out here. So that does have something to do with potentially delaying the big one. But it's inevitable. It's going to happen. I'm not for sure what the specific dynamics are across this area of New Zealand. It's there, though. These mountain ranges didn't form out of the crystal ball. There's obviously strain and pressure built up out here throughout time. They're near the Southern Alps mountains and many other areas across New Zealand. I'm sure it's absolutely beautiful out there. I would love to visit one day the New Zealand region. So anyone want to offer me a little trip, let me know. Look at this little area out here in the Banks Peninsula. This looks very dynamic out here. I'm not 100% certain as to what has caused this, as far as the geology behind this. But something is this like an ancient volcano or what? Right outside of the Christchurch area. I'm going to check in on that. That looks a little suspicious out here, just sitting out there. You know, what caused this? It's really weird looking. Anyway, New Zealand is one that I definitely need to study up on far as the plate dynamics go out here. I've studied quite a bit on the Hikurangi subduction zone, but specific individual areas like this, this looks out of place. It looks like, okay, well, did Google mess up? Did this, this agency that covers the satellite data, did they mess up? But obviously it looks like something's out here. I don't know. I'm kind of curious about that. It sticks out like a sore thumb. All right, moving on here across the area. One earthquake in the southern Pacific Ocean. That's a 4.5. That is a divergent boundary zone out there, occurring about 10 kilometers deep or so. Earlier this morning, big island of Hawaii taking a break out here. Things over the hot spot have mellowed out slightly. Not a whole lot of movement. Most of it's around the Pahala area. No major changes across the volcanoes there on the big island. One earthquake out here around the Red Sea, well, outside the Red Sea area near the Gulf of Aden fracture zone. Looks like this is occurring just off of this area here. Goodness, I need to refresh on my geography area here. I'm not for sure too much about this region. A couple different troughs, divergent boundaries here. Remember that swarm? We did have a pretty good swarm out here around the Gulf of Aden recently. May have something to do with that, but I'm not even 100% certain how to pronounce that area. 4.7 earlier this evening. Mediterranean, things look fairly quiet far as the USGS map goes, but EMSC model looks like a pretty deep earthquake here. You got a 3.2 occurring almost 450 kilometers deep here outside of the area of Italy, it looks like. Deeper movement quakes, obviously want to pay attention to those because that can add some further strain up at the surface levels. It's been somewhat quiet out here. I mean, we've had some earthquakes up in Poland, the Morocco earthquake, but over the last couple days or so, it's been somewhat quiet, but we'll continue to watch that. Atlantic Ocean, 4.9 out in the mid-Atlantic ridge. It's going to be this earthquake out here near the Romanche fracture zone. A bunch of fracture zones out here. St. Paul fracture zone. St. Paul. Goodness. All right. Let's see what else we got here, folks. I was just outside enjoying the beautiful night sky. Absolutely stunning out there. We got crystal clear skies right now, so able to see Jupiter, Saturn, the moon, almost full phase of the moon, and just absolutely beautiful imagery out there. And hopefully you guys take a few minutes. If you're like me, you'll find yourself just outside randomly looking up at the nighttime stars, gazing at them in wonders and appreciation. A lot of people tend to take that for granted. They don't even pay attention to what's going on above their heads, and more inclined with what's going on drama and TV and whatnot. I'm not a big TV fan. You'll never see me watching TV. I just don't do it. I'm not a TV fan. Never see me sitting down watching a TV show. So I enjoy the moments when I go outside and just observe the stars. And our local star, the sun here, solar cycle 25 coming up here in a couple years, June 2025 to be exact, solar maximum. And we've been going through these little phases here of sunspots that are active, and then they're not active. And that's probably, kind of like a roulette wheel, right? When you put the ball on and spin it, it all depends on proximity and location. And right now we're within the proximity here of the Earth facing side of the sun, where we're not really looking at anything major going on here. There's not a whole lot of dynamic setup here in terms of complexity within these sunspots. And I keep saying that because, well, they continue to decline. There's numerous sunspots. In fact, if you got your solar telescope and whatnot, the Earth-facing side here is obviously visible with multiple sunspots, and that's quite active. But when you're talking about flares, anything that may spark off a subsequent CME, there's just not a whole lot of complexity here with any of these sunspots that I'm observing. Maybe out here around the northwestern limb, but these are about ready to disappear out of sight, out of mind here, probably by tomorrow morning. Right now, the threat level, according to the Solar Ham site, 99% chance of C-flare. They have dropped these down a little bit. Not for sure why they're still 10%, but hey, I don't control this site, and I don't control the Space Weather Prediction Center. M-flare at 35% chance, and again, X-flare around 10% chance. I think these are a little bit elevated beyond what they should be. That's just my own observation. No major coronal holes are facing us, and really no major space weather events are forecasted. We'll see if anything pops up or not, but yeah, that's it. Far as the numerical models out here go, anyone hoping for some cooler weather out there in the eastern portion of the country? I think it's coming. Let me show you guys the weather outlook right now. We had about 85 degrees here in Northern California. Not bad. I mean, it's really not that bad. We could easily be up in the high 90s and maybe low 100s this time of year. I'm not even joking. California absolutely is horrible for weather. I mean, if you like hundreds, that's your perfect weather. But me, I call it horrible. So we have been dealing with some cooler weather up in the Pacific Northwest. Roughly neutral today and tomorrow. These are our average conditions here. I think upper 80s are pretty average for this area. But low pressure is going to swoop on down. And look at that. We're talking about it parking right over Northern California. And this is going to bring some much cooler weather, below average conditions here for my neck of the woods. And you know what? I'm going to open up the windows and enjoy every second of it. High temperatures here, maybe over the weekend in the upper 60s. That's more like November type weather for us here. I mean, depending on where you're at, right? Upper 60s may seem extremely hot for New York in December or whatever. But yeah, that's some perfect weather for me, I think. Chance of rain, some cooler temperatures. It's not really going to last too long. It's going to sweep out. High pressure remains parked over here across the Canada area above the Great Lakes. And we are looking at some high pressure building in across the western coast, but it doesn't look like that's going to last long. Hallelujah. I'm not even joking. Some cooler weather once again returning here to the Pacific Northwest and the West Coast. I'm very grateful for that. And it looks like that's going to stick around for a little while. So if you guys are hoping for some cooler weather out east, well, I'm not seeing it. You know, your averages, maybe average temperatures right here towards the middle of October, average. But as far as any cold spells go, I'm really not seeing any major events going on out there. West Coast, goodness, bring it on. Bring on the cool temperatures. Bring on the much needed rainfall out here. Hopefully we do see some rain out there. All right, let's see what we got here for rain accumulation over the next 10 days. Now, we only seen a sprinkle or two. Well, no, I think maybe we picked up maybe 100th of an inch of rain. That's very small, pretty much a sprinkle in our last system. There's no major widespread event here for rainfall across the Pacific Northwest, maybe way up north outside of Seattle and up into Canada. But this colder pressure, this low pressure system that's coming in is just bringing in with it some drier, colder air. And that's, to me, that's okay. It's better than 100 and something. So not a whole lot of rainfall expected here over the next 10 days. It looks like western Texas areas up around Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, St. Paul, Minnesota, and areas up around the Great Lakes will be getting in on some much needed rainfall. Far as hurricanes go, National Hurricane Center, we'll go ahead and check out the Atlantic here real quick. Felipe out here. The latest forecast models here continues to show it track towards the Puerto Rico area as a tropical depression. Let me see what we got here for excuse me, for the North Atlantic. See if we got anything stirring up out here. There's Felipe, I believe, somewhere around here. Just not a whole lot of potential for that system. Looks like it's just going to die off. And as we put this into motion here, there's really no major threats going on as far as the eastern portion of the country goes. Oh goodness, look at this towards mid-October. That's a lot of rainfall for Texas if this holds true. Massive low pressure system up here. But again, this is, you know, over 2 weeks away. This could change. But these are just computer models, and they you know, they do change minute by minute. But either way, I think that'd be good news, right, for Texas? Texas needs a lot of rainfall. When I was out there in Texas earlier this year, a couple times I was out there storm chasing. Stayed out there around Brady, Texas. Absolutely beautiful community. I love Brady. A lot of friendly folks out there. It's a small town. And, you know, there's some friendly folks out there. But it was dry. Somewhat dry around the Brady area. We did see a lot of storms up north and whatnot, but it seems like it missed Brady, Texas all the time. And I just enjoy staying at Brady every time I visit out there in Texas area. Just a lot of cool shops to visit, a lot of friendly folks there, local folks. And hopefully those you know, those people get the rainfall that they need out there. Fill up some of the lakes. Lake Brady out there was pretty low when I was out there last. I don't know if it filled up recently, but yeah, it was pretty low. All right, what else we got, guys? I think that's about it. Nothing major going on the seismograph stations for now. Everything looks calm. This little event right here on the Thailand area, the seismograph station. Sometimes these just pop off. Just a little error maybe, or a little adjustment on the seismograph digital needle. This is an earthquake or some type of movement. You'll see it. It will flatline this area. But yeah, Yellowstone National Park, we didn't really get a chance to check that. I did see some wind events earlier again out there in the Yellowstone area. But as far as earthquake activity, I honestly, maybe one little speck right here, and that's probably like a 0.01. I'm not even joking. That's a very small earthquake. So nothing major going on out there. Tremor map here tonight. Forgot to check that too, but 224 epicenters of tremor. That's somewhat of an uptick here across the Oregon area, outside of Medford, underneath this land, underneath this region. Still no major uptick. Our last major uptick was back in October of last year. So entering into about a year or so now of somewhat mellow and quieter conditions out here across the Cascadia as far as tremor goes. And we have seen them in the past. What that means, well, that we'll study that in the future once the big earthquake strikes out here. I think you know, this tremor monitoring is something new, so to speak, in terms of possibly predicting or forecasting the next Cascadia megaquake. Remember, the last one happened back in 1700, and that was at least a 9.0. There's definitely been historical studies on it, orphan tsunamis there that were kept back in the Japan records, and it's definitely been studied quite sufficiently. But this tremor monitoring is somewhat new. So I'd like to know, you know, what the you know, what we would see, so to speak, prior to the big earthquake out here along the Cascadia. Is it going to be elevated tremor? Is it going to be an extended period of lack of tremor? You know, who knows? But it's something to study. That's why I absolutely love studying and watching these tremors when they kick up here. I think, though, when tremors do stir up, large-scale tremor events, obviously that's adding further strain upstream across the locked area. That's the way I see it. And of course, I've kind of covered that many times here in previous videos. We'll go into that again one of these days, one of these nights. But for now, have a good night, folks. I'm going to jump off here and call it a night. Tomorrow is Thursday. Friday right around the corner once again. That's always good news when Friday comes up quickly. We'll catch you guys back out here tomorrow morning sometime. Have a good night and stay safe out there. Puerto Rico got one earthquake right up against the Puerto Rico Trench right now, 76 kilometers deep. And I did a little video on this a while back here, the potential of the mega quake across this area. Maybe I'll include that at the end of this video so you guys can check it out. But there's definitely a potential of some large-scale, big-time earthquake activity out here across the Puerto Rico Trench. Check that video out. It's coming up here, probably on the screen already, at least as far as this update goes. All right, folks, we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow sometime. Have a good one. Good night.